Auroni. I'm a student at Panther Creek High School working with the Carolina Health Informatics program at UNC Chapel Hill, and today I'll be sharing my poster presentation, Global Sentiment Towards COVID-19 on Twitter. For my research, I asked the question, how did public sentiment towards COVID-19 change in relation to certain events during quarantine? I decided to use the popular web service Twitter to do this. Twitter is one of the major social media platforms highlighting public opinion. With over 330 million users across the globe, Twitter provides insights into global sentiments on many topics. One can estimate global sentiments to certain events relating to COVID-19 by analyzing the most common phrases and their related sentiment scores from Twitter API data. To do this project, I used data from IEE Dataport and the Georgia State University's Panacea Lab. The IEE Dataport provided a list of tweet IDs referring to COVID-19 over a 3-month time period. To reduce the computing time, I used the pandas sample method to draw a random sample of 1,000 tweets per day over a 139-day period. This resulted in a total sample size of 139,000 tweets. Now, since tweet IDs don't contain any text information and are rather a hexadecimal code of string, I use the Tweepy Python library to create a method which reduces the compute time from turning the tweet IDs into text through a process of saturation. After saturating the tweet IDs with tweet text data, I use the TextBlob Python library's textblob.sentiment method to determine sentiment scores for each tweet. After determining the sentiment scores for each tweet, we use the pandas library to get an average running sample of each day and plot it onto this graph as we can see right here. This graph shows average sentiment scores on Twitter per day versus date. If we look at the graph, we can see some frequent trigrams. Now, what is a trigram? A trigram is a 3-word phrase such as last 24 hours that is unique to each tweet. Some frequent trigrams which came up were New York. This has a count of 18 over the 139-day period. New York peaked on Twitter from March 30th to April 30th, 2020. During this time period, New York was leading America in COVID-19 cases, and with New York, we can see there's a generally positive sentiment. The next frequent trigram is últimas 24 horas, which is a Spanish phrase meaning last 24 hours. This phrase, últimas 24 horas, was a common phrase used in many Spanish publications before headlining COVID-19 related news. Looking at it, we see a peak sentiment of 0.065 and a generally negative connotation. Finally, we have the trigram stay home. This is a common phrase that was used throughout the pandemic, and anything that was associated with this usually had a positive sentiment score. So in conclusion, the product determines global sentiment towards COVID-19 on Twitter and shows how to manage big data with the Twitter API. Using the Tweepy Python library, we can create a method of working with the Twitter API for free and show public sentiment towards COVID-19 over a period. So what does this implicate? Simplifying the Twitter API reduces the experience needed to work with tweet data. Rather than working with a big, impossible to compute amount of data, using my methods that I created will reduce the compute time greatly. So thanks to the UNC Data Aware program for making this possible, and thank you guys for all tuning in.
Okay.